people. And so when I told him, I said, I think taxation is theft. And he said, well, I think philosophically you might be able to get me there, but I still don't understand how you would do it. And I said, well, to me, it really is a philosophical understanding. It's like, I don't know how else you look at it. And I've yet to hear anyone give me a logical rationale for how taxation is not theft. Because you see, if I own myself and I own that which I create, or I own the byproduct of my labor would be a better way to say that. If I own myself, then the work that I do, I own that work. And I can do a couple of things with that. I can either do it for myself. So if I say I'm a carpenter and I build beautiful furniture, if I own myself and I go and I get the wood, I chop down the tree and I take it in and I do the carpentry work to it and I create a beautiful table or a beautiful chair, I own that chair. It's mine. I owned the wood that I produced with. The chair is mine. I can do whatever I want to with it. I can sell it to you. I can sit in it. I can set it on fire. It's my chair.
Now, you can't set it on fire if you don't have the proper permit, because that would be wrong.
No. Well, oh man, you're right. But the point I'm making is quite clear. I ought to be able to do whatever I want to with the stuff that I own. It's this basic understanding of property rights. If you don't believe that, then what you believe is that what you have, none of what you have is really yours, that it all belongs to somebody else, and it's just a matter of how much they want to let you have. And we, of course, don't have that philosophy because we have an understanding of both individual rights and property rights here. But if I own the byproduct of my labor, let's say I don't want to go to the effort of having to find people to buy my stuff. So yes, I make beautiful furniture, but I don't want to have to spend my days trying to find people to buy it. So you know what? There's a guy down the street, he owns a company, and he's looking for people who know how to build chairs. And he will pay me for my expertise to build chairs for him to sell. And I can have steady pay, and I might be able to have a little bit of vacation time, and I'll have a little bit more security because I'll have a steady paycheck coming in. And so I decide rather than work for myself, I'm going to go and work for my employer. Well, I own the byproduct of my labor, so I have to be compensated for the work I do. The guy down the road can't say, you know what, I need a guy who makes tables or makes chairs, so you have to come work for me. That would be slavery. So if I own myself, I own the byproduct of what I create, what is the government entitled to? How much of what I create and I produce is my neighbor entitled to? How much of what you create or produce is your neighbor entitled to? The answer is nothing. He is entitled to $0 or 0% of what you have, because he did nothing to earn it or create it. What taxation says is, you have to pay a portion of what you earn or what you create because you live here. There's no other explanation for it. It is theft, pure and simple. It is the taking of one's property without their consent. Once you come to that acceptance, yeah, I get that, Jason. Nope, you're right. That logic don't lie. Then the only question we have is, well, how do we do it without taxes? And as I laid out on the show with Dave, I said, I don't know. I said, I can give you lots of reasons on how you can do it because I've read all the books. I love it when I start talking about this stuff, and I guarantee you there'll be somebody who tells me to go read a book when we're done here. I'll say, oh, Jason, it's easy to fund a military without taxes. Here, you just need to go read this book. And I'm like, yeah, thanks, guy. I'm glad you read a book once. But I've read that book, and I've also read 3 or 4 others, and I'm not buying it. So it's not as though I'm not educated on these issues. I can give you all the ways that people say you could do it. I said, I'm just not entirely confident that it would work. But principally, I understand, and principally, we agree taxation is theft. And therefore, we have to do everything that we can to try and limit the theft as much as possible. while at the same time not destroying everything, because that's one of the things that Ruben brought up. He's like, we've got this thing and picking up my garbage, that works pretty good. And hey, the roads, we got problems with roads in LA, but I'm generally okay with the way it's working now. And he said it would be a huge upheaval of our entire system to try and change that right now. And I don't see how it would work. And so I say, yeah, you're right. Let's start with something simple. How about we stop, say, taking people's money because they work, like payroll taxes? How about we stop disincentivizing people from working by taking money every time they do? I mean, think about that for a minute. The government charges you to work. They say, oh, if you want to work in America, you got to pay a fine. How stupid is that? If we want people to work, we ought to incentivize them by allowing them to keep as much of their money as possible. How about we start cutting all of the things about government that in any way redistribute wealth, take money from one group of people or one individual and give it to another? There are simple things that we can do to start limiting the amount of theft that occurs in America. But what you see is that Donald Trump, as I said yesterday, is not a conservative. He's not libertarian. He's just kind of he's a guy who's strong on national defense, strong on nationalism, and in every other way is largely a progressive. And so he's going to take another $1 trillion on top of the $4 trillion we're already spending, and he's going to tack another $1 trillion onto infrastructure spending. It says the administration is looking for public-private partnerships to help cover the huge tab, which has been more complicated by the looming cash crunch of the federal government and projections of soaring deficits. So they're worried. They're like, well, man, we got deficits are growing, and now we're going to spend another $1 trillion. So they're trying to find private institutions to cover some of the burden. And I say to myself, why don't you just have the private companies bear 100% of the burden and let them keep 100% of the revenue that they make because of it? You go on down, it says what they're going to do is they're going to eliminate permitting of roads and highways that right now currently take a minimum of 10 years to get approved. Can you imagine trying to build a road and it takes you a decade to get through it? It's like we look at pharmaceutical drugs and we say to ourselves, why is it so expensive to buy Parafinax or whatever the latest drug is on the market? Well, because in order to get that drug into somebody's mouth, it took a minimum of 10 years and $1 billion, $1 billion with a B. They know they've got a limited amount of time to keep that product before generics start coming out. And so they got to maximize the amount of money because they tried this particular drug along with 4 or 5 others, and the other 4 or 5 didn't make it through. So this is the one that worked.
So now they're in the whole $4 billion, hoping this one takes off.
Now they got to maximize the amount of money they make off this one drug because it's taken 10 years to bring this one to market. And you think to yourself, well, what if it was easy? What if you just made it available, told people we don't know what this is, but if you want to take it, you can, and then let people make those decisions for themselves? Think about drugs that are potentially life-saving for people who are dying of diseases. Why can't they take those drugs on their own? We could certainly streamline this process by making people accountable for their own actions. The government gets out of the way. Instead of taking 10 years to bring a drug to market or to build a road, it takes 12 months. Now, all of a sudden, more drugs are coming to market, more roads are being built or updated or improved at a fraction of the cost that it was before. Prices are coming down. What a beautiful world we live in. Now, all of a sudden, you don't really need government cooperation to get it done. You just need government to get out of the way. You just need the government to get out of the way. And when you analyze most of these problems, whether it be money for infrastructure, whether it be high cost in prescription drugs and healthcare, what you find, health insurance for that matter, what you find is that for all the solutions that government come up with, In order to fix the problem, the vast majority of the time, they end up making it worse. And we would all be far better off if government just got out of the way. Stopped picking winners and losers, stopped mandating on the American people what had to happen in order for something to get accomplished, and just got out of the way. Said, this is not our purview. We don't know what we're doing here. You make the best decision you can, and if there's not enough information about what you're putting into your body or about the road that's underneath your feet, then don't use it. You be responsible for you. And if the company was negligent, if they make a mistake, we will make sure that the process for you going after them is swift and not very costly. These, of course, are all things that government is failing at miserably. So I hope, guys, as you guys listen to the show, as you guys share the show, that you understand there are very, very few things that government does well. Most of the time, government is working against your best interest. They're working, as I said yesterday, in the interest of special interests or in their own interest. And every time that they tell you that they need you to give up a little liberty or sacrifice just a little more for your own security, understand that behind the scenes, the government is using all of that information, all of that newfound liberty that you've given up in order to further control and manipulate your life. And if you want it to stop, the only way, it's not through more regulation, it's not through putting the right people in Washington, so we've got the benevolent dictators and the benevolent overseers that we need. The only answer is to limit the size, the scope, and the power of government. This is something that our founders understood intuitively. And it is something that we as Americans have forgotten. And if we are not careful, we will lose it forever. Until tomorrow, be safe, be good. I'll talk to you then.